A rally green 1969 Camaro Z28 sold at Barrett Jackson's Scottsdale 2023 auction for $275,000. First generation Camaro Z28 values in the United States have skyrocketed in the last couple years, but why? And will regular people ever be able to afford 1969 Camaro Z28s ever again? Let's talk about that.
The car featuring today, 1969 Camaro.
They say when you wound them up, to redline, these things made 350 horsepower.
A 4-speed transmission, no automatics in Z28s till 1970.
They're so sought after.
And this is a future collector's car right here.
The Z28 option code was introduced in December 1966 for the 1967 model year and was not mentioned in any sales literature, unknown to most buyers. The idea was to use off-the-shelf high-performance components to build both a spirited performance street engine and wicked race engine at significantly lower cost. This made it much easier to sell the program to Chevrolet's management. The Z28 was released to the press for first impressions at Riverside in November 1966. Available but not part of the Z28 package until spring of '69 was a D80 front and rear deck spoiler which had to be held down with specific parts. The '69 Z28 cars play a very different role in car culture today than they did in the '60s and '70s. Z-cars, as they're effectively known, are in the news for only one thing: their sale prices. The Rally Green Z car I mentioned was one of only a handful Zs that have sold for well over $100,000 recently. The Z28 package was introduced for the Trans Am series and cars were limited to a 305 cubic inch displacement. Chevrolet came up with the 302 cubic inch, which was basically a 327 block and 283 crank, putting out 290 horsepower. Costing around $4,000 to $5,000 in 1969 or $36,000 today, the RPO Z28 cars included better handling suspension, quicker steering, and twin rally stripes. Contrast to some of the other classic muscle cars, the Z28 appealed to a wide variety of different drivers. From hardcore racing fans to school teachers, it seemed as if everyone became infatuated with this gorgeous muscle car. Only available with a 4-speed transmission, 15x7 rally wheels, and front disc brakes, they also came with a 12-bolt rear end. Although not always, the 373 rear gear was standard. There are many little details that can make or break a value of a certain car, and there are a couple other videos on this channel that break them down in detail. The 1969 Z28 was one of the best Camaros and one of the most successful packages Chevrolet has ever produced. So how did these cars and why are they becoming more valuable? Well, first we have to learn why some Z cars bring more than others. It's not exactly that straightforward, but it does come down to a couple things. First, there's the trim levels. There's X77 cars, X33 cars, and then non-X code early cars. The different codes meant different combinations. For example, X77 is the lowest trim level Z28. There's Rally Sport cars, and then there's also non-Rally Sport cars. Rally Sport is better in my opinion because it was only available on the X33 Z28 cars and cost more when ordered new. There's also cow induction hood cars, and there's also flat hood cars. This one's a little bit tricky, but Z28 guys like me might say that the originality of a flat hood car with a flat hood is worth a premium. While it's more common today to see the cow hood, it was an added option on most Z cars. It's really hard to say which may be more valuable to a collector. Secondly, the '69 Camaros came in a variety of colors which can affect their value also. 2% of the '69 cars were ever painted code 10 or tuxedo black and are considered among the most rarest ones out there today. The one selling on Bring a Trailer last month for $152,000, but we don't know how many Z28s were ever actually painted code 10. Let's say you have a Norwood car with all the trim, X33, and the Rally Sport Hideaway headlights. You've already put yourself in a category where the number of cars with that combination is probably just a handful. I went to an auction last year where the owner changed the color of a car from Olympic Gold to a more desirable color, Hugger Orange, boosting the sale to $130,000. Over the years, a lot of Z28 Camaros have lost their original engines, transmissions, and even rear ends. This affects the price dramatically. That Hugger Orange car I just talked about had everything down to the original carburetor. Many of these cars were torn apart and turned into absolute monsters and drag strip destroyers that were a staple of street racing in the '70s, '80s, 80s and early 90s. I once bought a '69 Camaro from a guy that was completely gutted. The only thing that was original was the shell and the front subframe. This car, no matter how much money you spend to restore, it would never be worth as much as a numbers-matching dealer paperwork car. All the '69 Z28s that are unmodified, unmolested versions have become rarer and rarer, and prices have began to reflect that. 10 years ago, you could pick up a matching numbers car for about $50,000, but over the last couple years, it just seems like the Camaro market has gotten hotter and hotter, with prices across the board starting to creep up. First for the original cars, then even the not-so-original cars. Today, in the Camaro world, if you have a Z car, it means something. They made about 20,000 of them, so there's plenty to go around, but they just seem to have an aura around them or a mystique very similar to a Shelby or a Boss 302 Mustang to which they competed against. If we look at the cars that have sold on Bring a Trailer, we can clearly see that overall the Z28 cars have an upward trend, with the last car being sold for $40,000 way back in 2019. The majority of cars that have sold are between $80,000 and $120,000. But this past year, several cars at Barrett-Jackson have sold for even more. At Scottsdale 2023, the now famous Barrett-Jackson car has made its way across the auction block for $275,000. Not a black car, not a special paint, although rally green is rare, but even after that, a Le Mans blue car, one of the most common colors, matching numbers cars, went for $176,000. With classic cars being traded like the stock market and everyday consumers realizing the value of classics overall, the price of '69 Z cars seems to be going nowhere but up. Many people have asked me to find them a completely original Z for cheap over the last 6 months. Unless you're in the right place at the right time, this unfortunately is the new norm, and the time of $60,000 good Z cars is slipping away. Thanks for watching, guys. Like the video if you learned something new about Z28s, and subscribe if you want to see more gearhead content, and remember to have a great day.